sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. This is a show in which a stand-up comedian, which is me, Virginia Jones, has conversations with a therapist, which is my sister, Laura Ryan.
Hello, I'm Laura Ryan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but my main credit is sister to roast rock star Virginia Jones.
I will let that one pass without comment. I don't really like to roast.
But now you're commenting.
Right. Well, like now I'm processing it. I'm like, I don't really like to roast people because the things that I think about you are too mean to be said. I don't know how to roast you in a fun way. I will just hurt your feelings in a real way. It's a superpower that is best kept under wraps.
Or it's fully unleashed and then you make millions of dollars.
Right. Because I'm not going to tell you your shoes are stupid. I'm going to tell you I can see how badly you want everyone to like you and it makes me sad.
I think Nikki Glaser has cornered the market on that sort of thing.
She's really good at it. It gets her into trouble because she's a huge fan of Taylor Swift. But in Taylor Swift's documentary, there's a clip of Nikki Glaser saying awful things about her because that's what she does. And she was like, I'm so embarrassed, but that's just what I do is I say mean stuff all the time.
Oh, why would you say mean stuff about someone you liked? Maybe she was being paid.
The clicks, baby. You know,
yeah, that's true. She does it for the clicks.
Laura, what do we have for Zach's Corner this week? Zach's Corner.
He sent us a couple of funny little videos, and I just want to say thank you, Zach. You made me laugh. I'm not going to do the thing that I did last time, which is describing what he said. But anyway, I just wanted to say we're thinking about you, Zach. And now I'm going to talk about our listeners in Listener Corner because we just got our Spotify Wrapped results.
Yeah, they were really cool.
I was very excited. Here are the highlights. Our total new audience is up 999%.
What?
Our top 5 countries, United States at 1, Spain at 2, Japan at 3, Canada at 4, and Brazil at 5.
Gracias, España.
And also welcome, Brazil. I don't think Brazil was in our top 5 before either. We are a 2025 rising star on Spotify. This year, our show's growth outpaced 97% of other shows.
That's awesome.
Also, fans listen to our show for longer than 99% of other shows.
We try to keep the show very short so that it is listenable in one sitting. If you took all the listens over all the world of all the episodes last year, it was 10 years.
You guys have wasted 10 years on us and we appreciate it. And I want to say we owe all of this to you, the listener. So thank you, listeners, especially Zach, but there's others too. If you want your own corner, just send me some emails and we'll be G to G. If you want to email me, you can do that at hello@mysistersatherapist.com.
Another thing I liked from our Wrapped, it listed the top audiobooks that our listeners are enjoying. And number 3 is The Courage to be Disliked. This is about Adlerian psychology that I've talked about a lot. Is it people who listen to that book find us because they want to think more about Adlerian psychology? Or am I recommending this book and people are finding that?
Is this a snake eating its own tail?
How dare you?
Virginia, each week, our format is that one of us knows things and the other one is the dunce cap. So this week I get to sit pretty in my demi corner and you know things. What's our topic today?
I think that even though I picked the topic, this is going to be something you know quite a lot about. I would like to talk about memory. Memories,
like the corners of my mind.
Memory is interesting to me because it's the combination of being super fallible, but the individual believes that it's infallible. We will have arguments about, no, it went this way, when God only knows. Without a third person omniscient who really does know what happened, it's impossible.
Or a body cam.
The first idea I want to talk about, this guy, Roger Brown, came up with the concept of flashbulb memory in 1977. And this is the idea that traumatic events are frozen in time and you're going to remember them very vividly and you're going to have a lot of detail and accuracy is the idea. And an example is the JFK assassination. Every boomer knows what they were doing, knows what they were eating, what they were wearing, has really vivid, detailed memories of this moment because it was such a shock to the country and to the system.
The Challenger crash.
I think for today, it's 9/11. What are your memories of the 9/11 attacks?
The Challenger crash was worse for me because we just didn't at all see that coming. It was so shocking. Our teachers were crying. It was extra trauma.
Well, and we had been told all this stuff about it, that there was a teacher going up in space. All of our teachers related to that. It was a moment that we all of a certain generation witnessed. I remember my teachers talking about it, and I remember that they had wheeled the little TV in, and that when it happened, they just wheel it out. What do you remember about that day?
That's what I remember. I remember looking up at my teacher and seeing she sees that this is not okay either. It's not just me wondering what's
Is that
going
supposed
on.
to happen? Right.
Right. There was a teacher on board. That was the big story. It's
Christy McAuliffe.
right. A teacher just like your teacher is now burning in midair. I think that because of the age that it happened, it was particularly challenging, and also the context. Just like anything, we had been hyping it up for weeks. It was going to be a big deal for our school to have a live broadcast in our classrooms. So it was really challenging. I think the aftermath of 9/11 was a lot worse for me than the moment. I remember I was asleep. I got a phone call and I answered it as my friend, and she said, "Did you hear about the Twin Towers?" I didn't even know what she was talking about.
Because as a Texan, Twin Towers are not a big part of our day to day.
No. She said, "Turn on your TV." And I turned it on. And while I was watching it, the second tower went down. And then everybody started calling me because everybody knows that I don't watch the news. They were all calling to let me know. And that's when I came to the conclusion that if I need to know about something that's going on, I'm just going to wait and people will tell me.
And you've continued to live your life that way. I also was woken up with a phone call. A very nervous friend of mine called me because his parents were in New York. So he was personalizing it and they were going to go to the towers. And I'm like, buddy, tourists don't go to places before 8 a.m. But I understand that he was uncertain and he wanted to reach out. When I woke up, the second plane had already hit. So I was just seeing the aftermath. But I remember what we were doing. I remember I was making a bike seat cover for a bike that I had purchased. I remember we went to go see Belle and Sebastian that night. And it was a 3/4 empty room. Belle and Sebastian played the Birds' Turn, Turn, Turn for us.
Oh, that's really sweet. I actually went to New York 2 weeks after that to see Jack Black on SNL. That's what I wanted to see.
Oh, wow. I didn't remember that those things were so close together.
Yeah. I met this guy, Barry, and was making out with him. And he told me about that morning. He said he was standing in front of a hot dog cart and it was 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. And he said that when the building blew up, the glass from the cart went into his face. He had all of these tiny little pieces of glass in his face and he had to go to the ER to have them removed.
Well, I've always said, you know how to pick them.
Things didn't work out with Barry, okay? He's married to someone else now. I do remember what I noticed because I was already in the therapeutic space at this point. The hardest part for me about 9/11 was the week that followed 9/11 because every client that I saw was in crisis. This is the first time anything like that had happened here. And I remember one client who told me she was just sitting in front of the TV watching the towers fall over and over and over again on repeat. And she was just sobbing hysterically. And she had had a phobia about elevators and now it got way worse.
Right.
And I remember saying to her, "Did you lose a family member in this scenario? Did you know anyone?" No, she didn't. And I said, "So are you helping people by not leaving your house and just obsessing over this? Because I don't think you're helping anybody. If you want to help somebody, donate to the Red Cross or do something, but don't just sit at home and do this." Unfortunately, a lot of my clients have pretty extreme anxiety and they get stuck.
Yeah. So we have all these memories connected to this event. The tendency is to think, oh, I'm remembering this because of the emotional shock of the thing. The weeks after it were just terrible. A friend of mine had been on a medical leave from work for some time. When he came back to the office, it was 6 months after this event. He had all this stuff he needed to catch up on. And one of the things was a lecture at work that had been recorded for his convenience, but it happened to be recorded on 9/11. On the West Coast, a lot of us didn't take the rest of the day off. People were trying to get through their day, but this man was melting down and trying to present information at the same time. And what a weird document. Without getting too traumatic, I remember being asked for a divorce. I remember the date and where we were and who else was in the room. I have a lot of vivid details about that.
Speaking of divorce, I remember the day that I finalized my divorce. I remember the people in the room. I remember going before the judge and telling them that I wanted a divorce. And I remember that my My ex-husband wasn't with me. I was by myself. There's a lot of feelings of isolation because it was such a hard thing. And there wasn't anyone around because it was 2:00 on a Tuesday or something.
I find it interesting the state of Texas, you have to go before a judge. We never had to do anything. We filled out some paperwork and we filed it and then we got a divorce.
I had to wait 2 months because they have a cooling off period. For some reason, I'm going to make this snap decision to get a divorce. Why would I do that? I'm going to say that Texas doesn't trust women to make their own decisions. 70% of filings are done by women.
That's a fact that's borne out again and again.
I needed 2 months to decide whether the man that choked me in a karaoke bar was worth divorcing.
I also remember being in line to file the paperwork and my spouse was with me and he was texting with his girlfriend and was giggling to himself. And I was like, wow, this isn't that funny to me.
That's a good reminder of why I'm getting divorced.
The nature of flashbulb memories are that they're vivid. There's an emotional significance. They form around an important event with high emotion and also a feeling of certainty. You are sure you remember everything around that court appearance.
So I remember once our mother was talking about her memories and she was saying the only memories that she had from her childhood were really, really intense. And I said, yeah, Mom, because the way our brain works, you're not going to put aside energy and time for the day you got your first tennis racket or something. We store them this way because our brain is trying to protect us.
Our brain only has so much space. You don't have the space to remember how a grape popsicle tasted the 20th time you had one on the school bus. There just isn't the room. You're going to remember really richly detailed, highly emotional memories, either highly positive emotional or highly negative emotional.
And you're also going to remember really novel memories. I remember talking to a client about this. I was saying, I remember my first kiss detail for detail because it was novel and unique. And it was the first time it had ever happened. Do I remember my 17th kiss? No, I do not.
But I guess your 30th one, it was with a guy who had glass in his face.
I don't think it was I think that was past my 30th.
The reason these memories may not be that accurate are part of what makes them so vivid and have so much detail is that we've retold them. We've rehearsed them and we've retold them. And when that happens, your memories can change. Your first time you tell a story might be the most accurate. And then every time after that, it might have some little alteration, some little thing gets misplaced. It's just a funny combination of being extremely sure that you've got all the details right while they may not be that correct.
It's like the Brian Williams memory that we talked about in another episode that I can't quite place at this moment.
Pants on fire.
Oh, yes, that's right. Because we talked about lying. I don't think he intentionally lied. The story was just twisting out in his brain and he really thought it was true. He moved himself from helicopter B to helicopter A and changed up a lot of the details. Pants on fire. Check it out.
To your point about our mother, in 1981, this guy, Gordon Bauer, started developing an idea about emotional charge and memories. So he was saying that when we are in a happy mood, we tend to store the positive things that happen. And when we are in an unhappy mood, we tend to store the negative things. And in his experiment, he would basically hypnotize them or suggest them to be in a good mood or a bad mood. And then he would have them memorize lists and then try to recall them later. He found that the people in a happy mood were able to remember more things when they were in a happy mood again. They were able to connect to those things. And people were in a bad mood, it was easier to remember their lists when they were in a bad mood again.
They would remember the list of words better when they were in a bad mood than when they were in a good mood.
Right. Because they'd taken them in when they were in a bad mood.
They were in that state when they did the list.
So I think that this is why people who are happier people, they tend to have more positive memories. People who are generally unhappy tend to have more negative memories. And they may think, oh, I'm unhappy because all these terrible things have happened to me. What might be more accurate is that they're concentrating or storing the negative things.
And they're focusing on the negative things.
Right. If you go on a vacation and you have a really good time, when you're in a good mood, you're going to remember a beautiful vista or a great meal you and your partner shared. And the bad things that happened are either forgotten or they're only remembered later when you're unhappy. When you're in a bad mood, you might remember your luggage got stolen or the day that it rained all day. People on the extremes of either of these poles are going to tend more to focus either on the happy or unhappy things. The fact is that nobody has a totally unhappy life. Nobody has a life where everything that happens to them is bad. But zooming out on this to a big picture view, I think people who tend to be happier tend to make more happy memories and remember more happy memories. And people who tend towards being unhappy will focus on the negative, reiterate, dwell on it. Everybody knows someone who everything that's ever happened to them is bad. You know, Neil from Young Ones, everything that's ever happened to you, right? It's happened to me before, right? But twice as bad.
Yeah, Neil has a major depressive disorder. If anyone hasn't watched The Young Ones, do yourself a favor. I think you can find it on HBO. This is why I encourage my clients when they're going through a breakup to write a goodbye letter, because when I'm in a great mood and I have maybe moved out of the apartment with my crappy boyfriend, I'm going to remember all of the wonderful memories of that person, and I'm going to forget all the terrible memories. When you have them written down together, it's easier to stay on track.
I think we've talked about this in one of the Adlerian psychology episodes. When you have made a decision, you will tend to only remember the things that support that decision. When you've had a breakup, you'll only remember the negative things about that person because that helps your brain feel good that you've made the right decision. We're both friends with people who are going through breakups, and I've been talking to my friend about how it is a confusing time, that even if it's the right thing to do and everyone is going to be happier, not just her, remembering the positive aspects of them and nice times that you've had makes it really feel like the wrong thing to do. And also because you're so unhappy. Breakups have a lot of unhappiness with them just because it's the end of something you didn't want to end.
Nobody goes into a relationship thinking, I can't wait for this to be over and for it to be a complete failure.
I can't wait to invest a lot of time and energy and emotion into this and then just be left standing on a corner.
Trying to figure out whose pots and pans these are.
Oh, God. My takeaway from Gordon Bauer is if you find yourself consistently having negative experiences, having negative memories, take a step back and question whether you're not picking and choosing what to remember and what not to remember. If you're not picking and choosing just the bad stuff because it fulfills some idea that you have about yourself or your life. We talked about how there's lucky people and lucky people are the ones who expect to be lucky. If your expectation is unhappiness, maybe look at that.
Maybe try an antidepressant because that's probably what's going on. I'm a big proponent of this idea of state changing, moving from one state to another. I actually have this activity that I make my clients do sometimes. We find out what level they're on emotionally, called the emotional guidance scale. And it is a 23-point scale. We start off with the place where they are. And usually the place where they are in my clients' world is worry or discouragement. So we start out with a statement about my worry. I'm worried because I don't know how many pots and pans are mine and how many are his. So then we move up from worry to doubt. I doubt I'll ever figure out whose pots and pans are his or mine.
I doubt I'm going to get out of here with a frying pan I can use.
Exactly. And then we move up to disappointment. I wish I could keep all of my pots and pans in place and intact and not have to split them up. Overwhelm. I feel so overwhelmed when I think about going out and buying new pots and pans. Frustration or irritation or impatience. I am impatient about this move. I want to get it done. Pessimism. I don't think it's ever going to work. Boredom. I am bored with worrying about these pots and pans. Contentment. You know what? I'm happy with the pots and pans that I have. Hopefulness. I think I can get more pots and pans if I really play my cards right. Optimism. Hey, you know what? I got those great pots and pans. I can get more. Positive expectation or belief. I believe that I have the capacity for better pots and pans in my future. Enthusiasm, eagerness, or happiness. I'm happy about the pans that I have and excited about the ones that are coming. Passion. I am passionate about cooking and I'm so glad that I have this special pot to do it. Love and appreciation. I appreciate the fact that I had the resources to get the pots and pans that I have now. And then at the very top, joy, knowledge, empowerment, or freedom. I am free to buy whatever pots and pans that I want because I am single now.
That's a great process. What's hilarious about it is I have actually had a pan that I bought post breakup and I'm like, this is going to change everything.
So did it?
Okay. I don't shop a lot for the kitchen, for the home in general. Most of my pots and pans are ancient. I found myself without a frying pan and I got this nice new frying pan and it was green on the outside. this is so cool. Look at this beautiful pan. None of my other pans look this nice. Within like 6 months of using it on a gas stove, it was black, just like everything else. I'm like, oh,
I'm still ruining it the way I've ruined all of my pots and pans.
yup.
But the point of that exercise is that nothing has materially changed about my life, but I can change my attitude about the experience that I'm having right now.
I'm looking for things to feel good about in my experience and not looking for things to feel bad about.
Because I do really believe all human beings, even the most optimistic ones, tend to circle the drain as a natural state. I think that's why we are alive. I was talking to my friend who's going through this breakup, and she was saying that she keeps having these negative memories about this person popping up. And I said, your brain's going to keep doing this for a while because your brain is trying to keep you safe. It doesn't really help your brain too much to focus on what a great guy he was, because you're in a protection mode and your brain's just going to protect you.
And again, Adlerian, your brain doesn't want you to have doubt about the decision you've made. She's made a decision and her brain is trying to support that. If you make the decision, I'm going to leave my house, I'm going to split up our pots and pans, I'm going to seek out my own life, and you start thinking about how sweet he was when you first started dating or how romantic it was when he proposed to you, that doesn't serve you. That's just going to make you confused.
And I feel like most of our memories are designed to keep us safe. This is why our mother has this catalog of the most depressing stories in the entire world. When I was talking to this friend last night as she was unpacking, we had time to kill because I was trying to body double with her over the phone. I read her the entire story of Marvin Gaye's murder. The messages from that story, he bought that gun for his dad. The dad that killed him, he bought the gun. Don't buy guns.
Wow, that's inspirational. Do you think our mother has any happy memories?
Yes. And that was where the conversation started with her. When we talked about this, she was saying, all I can remember are the things that are a 10. She doesn't have a lot of them, but she was saying the only memories she has are really big, either on the positive or negative. And I think that's the way it is for most people.
Because you know that there's days when you have kind of an okay lunch and then you went and bought stamps, but that's not going to stick out.
It doesn't store. It's still in there because I've had that experience too of being like, wait a minute, I think I have done this thing before. And I go, oh yeah, but I've just forgotten about it because it was so incredibly boring.
Endel Tulving, another psychologist, came up with the idea of memory files and associations. You remembered that you had bought stamps because you were doing it again and your brain had filed these in the same place. His test was he gave people a list of things to memorize. He didn't hypnotize them to make them happy or unhappy. However they were, that's how they were. He gave them a list of 50 words, and then he asked them, how many words do you recall? And it tends to be about 50%, more or less. But then when he asked them leading questions, wasn't there a color on that list? And they go, oh yeah, blue. And he'd say, wasn't there an animal we associate with Halloween? Oh yeah, there's a bat on that list. Those prompts help people come up with more words. Those memories are still in there. It's just that they're not immediately accessible to the people.
When I was in high school, when I was trying to remember scientific lists or things that were rules, like King Henry jumped over something or other, I always made them really grotesque and really disgusting. I can't say any of the things. This is a family show, but I would take King Henry with the lead pipe in the library, and that's how I remembered it. When I was doing my NET, I was doing the same kind of drilling. When I was doing these mnemonic memorization things, I was sharing them with my classmates and they could not believe the horrible things that I said. But then after the test, they all thanked me because they remembered them.
This is the memory palace. That's the process that you're doing. First thing I want to talk about is this idea of sorting memories is why when you're trying to think of your brother's name, you might cycle through a couple brothers. When you're trying to remember a famous blonde actress, it might take you Sybil Shepherd, Meryl Streep to finally get through to the one you were looking for because your brain has sorted these in different folders. Like goes with like. The thing that you're doing in Sherlock Holmes, they call it the mind palace, but this has actually been around since ancient Greece. This guy, Simonides of Chios, was a poet who made up this memory trick. He thought about a place he knew well, a house or a temple. He can remember every doorknob. He can remember every corner. The things he needed to remember, he would visualize in that corner. And just like you remarked, the more bizarre or unlikely the image, the better you will remember it. When you're studying for a test on EMDR or NAT and you have to memorize a bunch of stuff that doesn't seem to be connected, a great way to do it is by connecting them by theme. People who memorize long lists of things as a sport, what a fun bunch they are. They have similar recommendations. Like if you're trying to remember the word cat and you're going to do it alphabetically, the cat has a sweater with an A on it. But making these associations helps your brain recall them later. He also talked about the difference between semantic and episodic memory. So semantic memory is just lists of stuff. It may not have to do with your life. Whereas episodic memory is this thing led to this thing led to this thing. I got some roller skates for my birthday. I learned how to roller skate. I broke my legs on my roller skates. These are all linked. They don't need their own little path. They already have a built-in link. I used to try to memorize my comedy sets because it looks better to not have notes on stage. I've released myself from that responsibility because I don't think memorizing stuff is like the main thing I'm here for. But when I was trying to hook one thing to another thing, I would imagine barrel of monkeys, those little plastic monkeys, and they had little hooks for hands. I would try to think of one thing about one joke that hooked to the next thing and just make a chain of monkeys.
That's a good idea. I think I would also pretend I was telling a story about a woman, and I would say, first she did this, and then that happened, and then this happened, and then that's her whole arc. I actually sent you a TikTok about memory this week. There was a study done with PTSD where they had the participants who have just had a traumatic episode play Tetris for 20 minutes. And apparently it doesn't store things in the same way when you're basically flooding your emotional memories with Tetris.
I think this is what led me to this thing because I don't understand how that works. If you've had a trauma, sit down and play a little Tetris for 20 minutes and it'll, I guess, help you not implant those memories.
You're not storing it because what you're doing is you're flooding your visual cortex with pictures of Tetris squares. That's what you're storing. And you're not storing the horrible memories. I remember like you were talking about the way that we store memories as if they're happening today. And I talked about this before. I had a client in the past who had been a volunteer firefighter. And this was before I had done the EMDR training. Meeting this man was what really inspired me to get on the horn and make that happen because I thought this man needs help and hypnosis is not it.
It's not enough.
He was telling me this horrible story about a person who had unalived themselves and finding their body. He had so many details. He could remember the wallpaper. He could remember the placement of the table. He remembered everything about this room. And we were talking about it. And I said, so when did this happen? And it had happened in the mid 70s. And I said, bro, I just want you to know that those children that were in that memory for you that you were so worried about, those people are in their 60s now.
Again, this is not helping anyone.
Right. These people are adults now and you're trapped in time. When these memories happened, I was a 2-year-old. So you're carrying this thing. He was reviewing it constantly in his brain every single day. It was driving him nuts. His presenting issue, I think, was insomnia. What you store creates what you feel. There are methods for getting rid of these things. I think EMDR is really helpful. I think NET is really helpful. Going in the mind palace and doing a clear out, I think can be super, super helpful. So Virginia, what are your final thoughts on this topic?
I think that the flashbulb memory idea is a lot of what guides cinema, this moment of high clarity. And you just get it in movies a lot and thrillers. Boring thing, boring thing, boring thing, boring thing. Boom, a monkey eating the brains of a dog. And that's attractive to us because that's how we think that our minds work also. I continue to think that we have more control over not just our emotions necessarily, but the way we store information and the way we revisit information, that we have more control over that than we think. This guy thought he needed to think about this terrible scene every day, and he didn't, and it wasn't helping anyone. I've had this experience where something happens to me, it's crummy, whatever. And then someone else talks to me about it years later, and I realize that they might have internalized it more than I did. Or something happened that I've completely forgotten about, but they've kept it going.
I really do feel like it has something to do with our biology or our ancient brain. I think it's a coping strategy that was developed to keep us alive. Because if you, Virginia, were walking through the woods and you take this certain path and then you watch your best friend's head get ripped off,
You want to remember that. Don't go back.
You don't want to forget that one. We need to keep that top of mind because every time I walk through that wooded area, I need to remember, oh, we're taking a left over here because I don't want my head to be ripped off.
We're thinking of life as a series of patterns. And if we can find new patterns, we can keep ourselves safe for longer.
We can crack the code to protect ourselves. Like many things with the human brain, it was intended for good, but sometimes it turns to evil.
I guess my final thoughts are if you find yourself really dwelling on a person or an incident that made you unhappy, question whether that is necessary. How is this serving me? How can I move past it?
And seek professional help. Everyone thinks that therapy is just about sitting in a room talking to a nice lady, but it's really not. It's about...
And Laura's not that nice.
No, I'm incredibly mean. But I think it's more than anything about sitting in a room, taking everything that's in your brain, dumping it out on the table, and figuring out what you want to hold on to and what you want to get rid of. Going to therapy is sort of like being a hoarder who's meeting with a coach who's trying to help them to go through all of their belongings and decide, is this one worth keeping? Can we let this one?
Yeah.
Can we send this one to the Salvation Army?
Does this spark joy? Does this keep you safe in the way that you think it is?
Right. Is this helpful? Do we need to really focus on this thing?
Laura, what are your final thoughts on this topic?
Don't believe everything you think. Question everything. And I think it's important to realize that we think that our brains are set, but they're really not. They're more like a gelatinous ooze that we can manipulate and change.
They're almost liquid.
I heard a brain surgeon describe them as like a medium firm tofu. So kind of squishy. But the good news about that is that I don't have to just stay stuck and I don't have to keep my brain and my memories the way that they were. I can pick and choose what I'm going to focus on. I had a relationship end way too long ago. I feel like it's been 3 years. And I was finding that I was still having thoughts about this man, angry thoughts every day because I have a lot of entanglement to him, but I was putting a strong negative emotion to the thing. So it would be like, oh, Crest with Scope. That was his toothpaste.
Right.
He sucks. What I've been doing lately is I've been saying, oh, Crest with Soap. That was his toothpaste. And that's okay. He was doing his best and we're going to move on. And I found that doing that has helped a lot of this stuff to subside. Paying attention to my thoughts and deciding whether I'm going to keep them.
Well, that's an interesting point also that I think we like to villainize people to make sure that your brain knows that they were no good, but that can just make you focus on them more.
I've had so many resentments with him because I just feel like everything was left very dramatically and suddenly, and I didn't feel like I had the time to really process it in the moment. I think I've just spent the last 3 years processing all of my anger and resentment about the way that he handled things. What it leads me to is constantly thinking about him and feeling angry.
In a movie, if you were thinking about him all the time, the logic would be, well, you're meant to be together. You're thinking about him all the time because you are so angry and disappointed.
Right. I'm thinking about him all the time because I still have a lot of open live wires in my brain that connect to him and his memory. They are now being tied to resentment, which is a really strong and very powerful emotion. And so they're staying up front. My friend said, well, you should start putting a rubber band around your wrist and slapping yourself every time you think of those things. But no, that's more negative connections. I don't want to do that.
It's just reinforcing.
It is.
That experience is why one time in Trader Joe's, I muttered that a box of maple cookies should go F itself.
Yes, that's what I find myself doing. You MFer to like some bag of chips. And it's
the chips
dumb.
didn't do anything. It's
The
not their
chips were
fault.
just trying to get eaten. They're doing their very best. Virginia, if people don't want to spend all of their time feeling depressed about their past mistakes and instead maybe want to have an evening out with some laughs, how would they go about finding more about you on the internet?
You can find what I'm up to on my website, www.badinia, BADINIA.com. And that is where a calendar is. And if there's a big show coming up, I might promote it separately. But you can definitely find out where I'm at there. I also have a TikTok that is Badinia and an Instagram that is Badinia. I'm sorry I said the thing about how monkeys like to eat dog brains, but if you think about them as soft tofu, you can see why that would happen.
Also, Virginia, what if I'm a person who doesn't live anywhere near Oregon, but I would like to hear a live set that's been pre-recorded of yours, how would I go about buying that?
Thanks so much for asking. I do have an album, Gothic American, and it is available on Apple and Amazon and Bandcamp and Pandora, not on Spotify because screw them. And I would love it if you did. If you would like to hire My Sister's a Therapist to represent your animal sanctuary or candle making factory,
Or your soft tofu brand called Brains.
you can reach us at hireus@mysistersatherapist.com. You can always write us a note of encouragement, question, or a show idea, as we said before, to hello@mysistersatherapist.com. Laura, where can people find more about you on the internet if they should wish to see you clinically in the state of Texas or see you socially in the state of TikTok?
If they want to email me and they work at Imperfect Foods, Liquid Death, Waterloo, Sunday Riley, AAA, Costco, Target, or GSauce, they can send us an email at the aforementioned place. If you are listening to our podcast right now and thinking this might be the best podcast I've ever heard, and I'm going to listen to 100% of this episode, you should tell that lady over there, that guy on his bike, that butcher, that
Baker,
that
Candlestick
candlestick
maker.
maker. There's a lot of those around. And say, this is the best podcast you've ever heard. If you want to book an appointment with me and you live in the state of Texas, you can go to lauraryan.org. If you want to watch one of my incredibly hilarious TikToks, you can go to I am Laura Ryan on TikTok. If you're interested in the show, you can go to our Instagram page, My Sister's a Therapist Instagram. Or if you want to just roll through all the episodes, you can go to mysistersatherapist.com to listen to every episode that we've ever done.
Laura, this is the part of the show where sometimes you read a review or a nice comment that someone has sent us. And if you do want to write one on Amazon, Audible, or anywhere else, we would love it. Do you have one to share this week?
Yes, I have an email today from Neil. And Neil said, a mutual friend of Virginia here in PDX just introduced me to your podcast, and you've got yourselves a new fan. You and your sister are the bee's knees, beyond excited to listen to the 100+ more of these things. I just listened to Stress with Courtney Orlando. That was a phenomenal episode. Wish I'd found you both decades ago, as these conversations are working to fix nearly everything wrong in my brain. Thank you, Neil.
I'm so excited for Neil and the 57 hours that he has left to listen to us.
I hope that Neil can listen to us for 10 years.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you to all our listeners. Thank you for making our Spotify Wrap so good this year. In the words of our spiritual founder, Billy Ray Valentine, we'd like to say to each other and to all of you, we can make it, baby.
Me and you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.